What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different, but also something I've done here on the channel before. I've done double and triple feature reviews here on the channel before, including one I did for Mortal Kombat and the final episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where I did a TV show movie kind of collab review like I'm doing right now. It didn't go so well in terms of views with that video, but yeah, I just want to catch up a little bit on the videos that I was trying to make at the end of last week but didn't get to. If you guys saw my community post, you know that my grandfather actually just passed away this weekend, and I was with family. I just didn't really have the energy, the spirit, or the time, nor did I really feel like it was a good time to be filming reviews for the Suicide Squad and for Bad Batch. So, you know, decided to delay those this week. Big thanks to all of you who saw my community post and left some love there for me and my family. Definitely appreciate it. But if there's one thing I can take from my grandfather is no matter how happy or sad a situation may have been, at the end of the day, he was going to do what made him happy, what brought him peace. And I love making YouTube videos and talking to you guys about the various geeky things that we talk about here on the channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the first review for this video, and that is for The Suicide Squad. So it's finally time to talk about James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. After he was fired by Marvel and Disney because of those tweets from years and years ago, when he was no longer going to be doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which has obviously changed since then, yeah, he ended up getting the chance to go and direct a DC film, the follow-up to The Suicide Squad, or not The Suicide Squad, follow-up to Suicide Squad, and now he's made The Suicide Squad. It's meant to be somewhat of a soft reboot, but still takes place in a universe where these characters have already had experiences before. So it's not like a complete reboot, but it's also not like a huge sequel in the terms that it kind of picks up from everything that happened in that last film, and it's picking up story threads that may have been kind of loose in that film. It kind of acts as if that film existed, but you don't necessarily need it to watch this movie. However, I think if you've seen that movie, it definitely adds to certain things, especially when it comes to the returning characters in this film, like Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, Jai Courtney's Captain Boomerang, or Joel Kinnaman's Rick Flag. And so, yeah, you know, there's a bunch of returning characters in this movie with the exact same actors from said film. There are plenty of people who do not return in this film, like Will Smith being the most notable one. We knew that quite some time back that, you know, Will Smith was no longer going to be playing Deadshot, and that role was actually going to go to Idris Elba, who was in this film but playing the character of Bloodsport. And yeah, I really enjoy the fact that they were able to kind of bring him in and give him a different character. However, you can pretty much tell he is very much just Deadshot. You know, they took the basic skeleton of who that character is and his story and just put Idris Elba in there with a new name. And for the most part, I guess I say it works. You know, I can say it definitely works. It's not something that took me out of the movie, but it's definitely something worth mentioning. And so, yeah, I guess the biggest question everybody's been asking, and I think has already been answered, especially since I'm a little bit later to the game, is does this one hold up compared to the first one? Is it better than the first one? Because that first one was not necessarily the most loved film. I actually really enjoy it. Now, is it my favorite in the DCEU by any stretch of the imagination? No, but there's definitely things I enjoy about that film on a visual level, the action, the music. It's a big, fun, over-the-top comic book movie, and I feel like a lot of people are spoiled by these films these days to the point where they can't just sit back and enjoy a movie like that, because ultimately, I like Suicide Squad. It's not the greatest film of all time, but as a big fan of these characters and just wanting to be able to see them on screen and kind of being able to see it done in a decent and good way, yeah, you know, I had fun with that first Suicide Squad movie, and every time I've watched it, I've enjoyed it. Now, with this movie, without a doubt, it's light years better. James Gunn has just really proven himself to be a phenomenal comic book director, and he's great with ensemble cast and really being able to tell a great, big, fun, over-the-top comic book story that has a lot of heart, charm, and also a lot of little clever moments in terms of the humor and just, you know, character moments altogether. This is definitely a very cleverly written comic book film, and I like that it's very self-aware. It knows what it is. It's having fun with the Suicide Squad property, these characters, and the idea of the Suicide Squad. If you've ever read any of the Suicide Squad comics, or you've ever seen any of the animated stuff, yeah, you know, it's just a big over-the-top fun concept, and you can do so many crazy things with it. And I love that we're in a day and age where there are so many big budget R-rated comic book movies that are coming out that these studios are doing. Now, of course, Marvel themselves, Marvel Studios, hasn't dipped their toes into that just yet, but it seems like they will be with Deadpool. But even without that, you know, Fox was doing it with the X-Men movies, including Deadpool, and now we have DC, you know, really killing it with things like Joker, and, you know, Birds of Prey, I believe, was R-rated as well, and now this one, and you know, Zack Snyder's Justice League. I'm really enjoying the fact that, you know, they're realizing that, hey, the fan base that, you know, grew up watching these characters, yeah, sure, there are kids who still love this stuff, and there's plenty of that content for them. But as a longtime comic book fan, to be able to see these movies that are, you know, definitely there for, you know, my age group, you know, the people who grew up with these characters who want to see something a little bit grittier. Yeah, I love it. I really, really enjoy what they did with this movie. It's big, it's over the top, it's colorful, it's vibrant, it's fun, it's vulgar, it's violent, it's bloody, it's gory. And what I really enjoy about this movie altogether is that they really lived up to the promise of just really making this movie that you don't know what's gonna happen. They take these big over the top concepts, but a lot of the movie is pretty grounded, and to be able to see these characters go throughout the course of the film and tons of them being taken out throughout the course of the film in really bloody and violent ways, it's great. I had a lot of fun being able to see the new characters in this film as well, like John Cena's Peacemaker. You have Ratcatcher 2. You have King Shark in here, voiced by Sylvester Stallone, which I thought was great because King Shark is a character that I've always thought is cool on the comic book pages, in the video games, in the cartoons and stuff. But yeah, the idea of seeing him in live action actually freaks me out because if anybody remembers, I'm hugely afraid of sharks. And so, yeah, you know, when you see him on the Flash television show, he's CGI enough and he's cheesy looking enough that you can kind of just, you know, roll with it. In this movie, there are some pretty good close-up shots where it's pretty photorealistic, and I gotta say, this is the most sympathetic I think I've ever felt for a photorealistic shark. If you take away any of, like, you know, the cartoon sharks that I've definitely been sympathetic for before in films, yeah, those don't count. But when it comes to this, yeah, I was kind of surprised that there were these moments where I was actually really into his character, really feeling his character, really felt for his character. I thought that the voice that they gave him, making him kind of this big dope in this iteration of the character, was a lot of fun. A little bit more like the Harley Quinn animated show. But yeah, overall, really, really enjoy this movie. I thought it was a great time. I thought the action was big, fun, over the top. Again, it's just cool to be able to see this movie that you just don't know who's going to survive. There are people getting taken out left and right that you just were like, I did not expect that character to die this early on in the movie or at all. There are things that happen to certain characters in this movie that you're generally like, oh, damn, like they went for it. And it leaves me kind of excited because you can make more Suicide Squad movies without really having to worry about making something that is, you know, kind of building onto sequels and sequels. You can have characters return. We can have characters do spin-offs, like we know that John Cena's character Peacemaker will be getting an HBO Max series that I believe James Gunn also directed. But ultimately, yeah, what I really enjoy about the way that they executed this movie is that it really just kind of leaves a lot of breathing room for the creators that come into this franchise later on to really just do something big, over the top, and fun that, you know, is part of this universe that's been building across multiple films, but doesn't really need to be. It really doesn't matter. It could be its own big fun comic book adventure, and that's exactly what we got here. Again, James Gunn continually proving himself to be a phenomenal director in this genre. Really, really enjoyed, again, the visuals, the performances. You know, there were definitely elements of the film that I could say had some convenient writing. There was definitely some elements of the film that, you know, in terms of humor is not going to land for everybody. The film is fairly vulgar, and sometimes they're pulling from modern day references to make jokes, and sometimes that lands and sometimes that doesn't. And if you're not really into a lot of vulgarity into films or a lot of gore or blood or any of that stuff, then you may not enjoy this film. So I can't give it a flat out recommendation to everybody. But as a comic book fan, I think this movie is a great time. I actually talked to my dad about it yesterday and he didn't enjoy it. So I think it all depends on who you are. But overall, it seems like the reception of this film is going to be very positive. I think this movie does a lot of really cool and fun things with the comic book genre. It's light when it needs to be. It's silly when it needs to be. But it's also big and deep and badass when it needs to be as well. And I just think overall, it's a movie that's not to be taken too seriously. It's just a great popcorn film. Sit back, have a laugh, watch some epic action, and be able to see a story unfold that you're not really expecting what's going to happen. There are tons of little great, cute, and touching moments that you don't expect to happen. There are these brutal moments where you're looking at the screen and you're like, oh my god, damn. And there's also these just great action, big over-the-top comic book popcorn moments that you just kind of sit back and you're just like, feeling like a kid watching, you know, cartoons back in the day. It feels awesome to have grown up watching things like the Justice League animated show from back in the day, or the Batman animated show, and the various DC animated movies and shows that are coming out when I was a kid that for the most part were family friendly. And to finally be an adult and be able to see content that's, you know, made for us longtime fans who are growing up with the content, I think that's some of the coolest things that any of these content creators can make. You know, anybody who's creating entertainment within these franchises that have been, you know, going on for years and years, where their audiences have grown up with this. I think it's awesome to be able to have something that's a little bit more for the adult that still has, you know, that charm and that fun and that silly, whimsical, you know, fantastical element that you want out of a comic book movie, but also, you know, being able to kind of bring in some, you know, grit. Now, don't get me wrong, I still love a good, silly family comic book movie, but it is nice to be able to see stuff like this in the mix as well. And I love that DC has, you know, kind of had that balance. You know what I mean? They're not necessarily going for, hey, this movie is meant to be marketed straight to kids. In a lot of ways, they probably still think that parents are going to take their kids to see it because of, you know, what the characters that are in it, the fact that it's DC. But yeah, they don't really care too much to make it necessarily only for kids. They're doing a franchise that has things like a Man of Steel or a Batman vs Superman, but also stuff that has movies like this. And I really love that they just went for it. I love that they gave James Gunn full freedom to do some cool things in here. And also, if you're a fan of Guardians of the Galaxy, there are tons of Guardians of the Galaxy references, little Easter eggs, and actors who appear in this movie, which was definitely nice to pick out. I love being able to see those actors that always work with James Gunn kind of just appear in different scenes in the movie. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up my thoughts on Suicide Squad there, or The Suicide Squad. I hope with the next movie they give us some sort of cool subtitle, so it's not like, you know, The Suicide Squads. I don't know. Suicide Squad and The Suicide Squad, especially when you're kind of having returning characters, you know, it kind of plays off of the original. It feels like a lazy title in my opinion, but overall, I love the film, and I guess that's all that really matters. And really quickly, let's go ahead and jump into my spoiler thoughts on the last episode of The Bad Batch that came out. It's the first part of the finale. This one was titled Return to Kamino. Again, this is a spoiler warning, so if you have not seen this episode, definitely recommend clicking away from this video, and I hope you enjoyed my review of The Suicide Squad. But if you have seen this and you want to hear my thoughts, let's go ahead and get right into this. So yeah, this episode was called Return to Kamino, and at the end of last week's episode, we know that Hunter was captured by Crosshair. And yeah, you know, now you have the Bad Batch and Omega really trying to find where Hunter is. They end up finding out that he has been taken back to Kamino, obviously the home planet of where the clones were created, the Kaminoans, you know, that's their home planet. And ultimately, this is a rescue op. And so majority of this episode is them trying to sneak their way to find their way to Hunter. And then we get these great moments between Hunter and Crosshair, really starting to kind of get these little moments where we realize that Crosshair may not be under the, you know, influence of the inhibitor chip, at least not in the way that we thought he was. There's these small little moments that in his dialogue that definitely make you think, okay, so do you not have the inhibitor chip in you? Let's see what happens. And over the course of the episode, there's some great dialogue between Hunter and Crosshair in this episode. We also learn that the Empire is pretty much evacuating the entire Kaminoan cloning base and just getting everybody out of there, including the top tier Kaminoan scientists and, you know, all the clones that were there, the other Imperial people that were there at all. And yeah, they're kind of doing this on purpose so that they can destroy this Kaminoan base, destroying all evidence, and now the Empire will have full control of all cloning and the individuals who were part of the cloning, and that original base and all of its evidence will be completely destroyed by the Empire. I'm really enjoying seeing this transition. Again, I've said it before on multiple weeks now, but being able to see the transition from the Republic to the Galactic Empire is something that I've been really enjoying with the show, because though we've seen it in books and comics, it's really nice to be able to see it on screen. You know, we've always kind of jumped to something like Rebels being like one of the closer things that we've had on screen, where we already kind of have the Empire. Even in Solo, the Empire is already pretty established at that point. So to be able to see, you know, what's happened between the Clone Wars and something like Solo is really, really nice. Even something like Jedi Fallen Order, which is right there in that ballpark, you know, also kind of the Empire is already pretty well established at that point. So as I said, to be able to see the stepping stones from the Republic into the Galactic Empire, love it. I think they're doing a really great job with it, and I'm really enjoying the way that it's kind of casually making its way there. We already know that there's going to be a second season of The Bad Batch, so I cannot wait for that. But yeah, this episode, majority of the time, is the Bad Batch trying to find their way to Hunter. They eventually do in one of the training facilities, one of the areas that the clones train in, and when they end up getting there, they end up finding that it's a trap, that Crosshair had them all kind of set up to be there in a trap. We have stormtroopers that are actually standing guard and actually pointing their guns at the Bad Batch. And we end up learning right there in this scene that Crosshair actually removed the inhibitor chip from his head. He didn't actually mention when he took the inhibitor chip out. He pretty much said, like, what does it matter? And Hunter definitely really wanted to know. But yeah, you know, it just seems like Crosshair now is at this place where he feels 100% abandoned. He feels like even though he had the inhibitor chip in his head, that the Bad Batch should have kept coming for him. They should have been resilient. They were brothers. They were family. And he feels like everybody else in the Bad Batch was more important to them when they needed to save them. But in this case, Crosshair to them was kind of like somebody who had just kind of gone off the deep end, and they weren't willing to go and get him. And it made me think to myself, had they really done a couple of episodes where they really tried to go get Crosshair and maybe, you know, shot him, you know, with their blasters set to stun, and they would have actually taken him to get his inhibitor chip out, they probably could have avoided all of this. But at this point, Crosshair really feels abandoned. He feels like even though he had the inhibitor chip in his head, they didn't even try to come and get it out of his head. So now that he has it out of his head, he just feels like they kind of gave up on him. And I really do appreciate the way that they chose to handle that. I think Dave Filoni's doing a phenomenal job with the show. Again, D. Bradley Baker. I mean, the dude is so talented and he should be a household name. He's such a great voice actor. He's worked on so much outside of Star Wars, but just with Star Wars alone, with the animated shows that he's been a part of and some of the movies, his voice acting is just top notch. And when it comes to something like The Bad Batch, where he's playing majority of the main characters and he's doing different voices that are all similar but yet different, but also are in line with the clone trooper voices that we've heard in the Clone Wars and in things like Star Wars Rebels. And also, you know, he's doing those other clone characters that are appearing here and there. The man is just a top-notch voice actor, and he's really showing his talent with each and every episode. So this episode ends up with an epic moment at the very end where Omega ends up trying to save the Bad Batch from Crosshair and the other troopers by releasing a bunch of droids. Now, before she does that, Crosshair actually gives them a chance to join him with the Empire. He pretty much says, I'm going to do something for you that you didn't do for me, which is give you a chance. And this is when he ends up spilling the beans about the fact that he already does not have the inhibitor chip inside his head. And yeah, I really love this scene because before he decides to give them this chance, he ends up shooting some of the reflectors that he has around the room, which was set up in the Clone Wars, where we know that he shoots off of those and is able to kind of just destroy everybody with amazing accuracy. And so he ends up doing that, taking out the other TK stormtroopers that are around so that he can give his brothers a chance to, you know, make a decision on whether or not they're going to be with the Empire. That's when Omega ends up releasing these training droids, which ends up getting the Bad Batch to team up once again with Crosshair to fight all together to take out these droids. And when their theme music ramped up, man, I got chills. I've seen this episode twice now, and literally each time I got chills. There was so many chills in that moment where they're just like, we need to team up no matter the animosity that we have together. We're brothers and we're a badass team. We're the Bad Batch. And they all just start kicking ass together, shooting around, taking everybody out. The music in that moment is epic. And yeah, really, really enjoying the theme that the Bad Batch has. You know, it's just so crazy to think back a couple years ago when I was at Star Wars Celebration and I was there in the Clone Wars panel for the final season, and they showed us that first big action sequence with the Bad Batch from that final season, you know, and this was, you know, months and months before it would ever air on Disney Plus. And to be able to have been in that room with Dave Filoni and the cast of the Clone Wars watching that first scene of the Bad Batch and now be here all these years later and have, you know, all these episodes of this show titled The Bad Batch that we didn't even know we were getting at that time. It's just awesome. I've loved these characters. I didn't think I would fall in love with these characters the way that I did, but you know, honestly, I never really doubt Dave Filoni, so I don't know why I thought I wouldn't love these characters. He's a phenomenal guy when it comes to Star Wars. He's a phenomenal creator, and he's obviously knows what he's doing. He has so much passion and love for Star Wars, and overall, I just love the way he's been building these characters. We only have one more episode in this season, but I'm so excited that they already announced a second season. Overall, the action sequence at the end was great. There's tons of great emotional, touching moments. There's also a lot of music that's reprised in this episode from the prequel series, specifically Attack of the Clones, when they go to Kamino, specifically the music that's playing when Kenobi is on Kamino in episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So to be able to hear that music reprised here when they're back on Kamino, thought that was great. Really love the way that they're able to tie into the prequels and really expand the narrative around the prequels with both the Clone Wars and now this. And Rebels does it as well too. And so overall, I think these animated Star Wars shows have just really proven themselves to be top tier Star Wars in my opinions. And I really, really am thoroughly enjoying the animation, the voice acting, and really pretty much everything about this show. And when it comes to this final episode, or the last episode that came out, we have one more episode after this. Yeah, I thought it was great. Thought the voice acting, thought the action, thought all the touching great moments were awesome. And the episode ends up ending with, after this great action sequence where they've all fought together, Hunter ends up pointing his blaster at Crosshair and ends up shooting him with his blaster set to stun. And as they try to escape, they end up finding out that the Empire is already begun their bombardment of the Kaminoan cloning base. So it's already being shot up and destroyed, exploded from all angles, sinking into the waters of Kamino. And the episode literally ends with them literally running away from their one escape being destroyed right in front of them. We have one more episode, and it looks like that cloning facility on Kamino is going to be destroyed any second now. I have no idea how they're going to survive this, and I cannot wait to see what the final episode has in store. Sorry if I was a little bit all over the place with this Bad Batch portion of the review. I feel like sometimes I'm like, all right, where am I in the review when I'm talking about it? But also, I haven't done this for a few days, and I feel a little tongue-tied. There's a lot of mistakes that will not be in this video. I'll tell you that, guys, right now. So a big thanks to you guys for watching, whether you watched the Suicide Squad review, whether you watched the Bad Batch review, or whether you watched both of them. Either way, a big thanks to you guys for watching. I genuinely appreciate it. Please hit that like button if you guys enjoyed the video. Comment your thoughts down below. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.